It's LandCruiser Chaos. We're here to examine how Toyota's full-size 4x4 Aussie favourite is being handicapped by its own success. Will you miss out on the chance to own one? I'm CarsGuide Deputy Editor James Cleary, and joining me today to look at this SUV supply crisis is key contributor Andrew Chesterton.
Hello, everyone.
And our Managing Editor, Head of Video, Matt Campbell.
G'day.
We'll also take a look at the fresh metal we've been driving this week and unearth the comment of the week. And look, thanks to all the people that stood by. We were attempting to do a live stream of this episode. Thanks for your patience. Launch control was engaged. We were at max RPM, but failed to get the power down. So we've been able to put this one down out nonetheless. So let's get into it. LandCruiser Chaos coming to Australia soon. This is a story that you authored through the week, which generated a lot of interest. Let's put it that way, Chesto.
Yes.
And that orders have been suspended in Japan, which just seems extraordinary. Talk us through it.
So look, there's obviously a huge amount of interest in the 300 series more generally, hence the interest in this story. And it all broke last weekend, and we wrote it earlier in the week, that basically Toyota in Japan has taken really the unprecedented step of suspending all orders across its LandCruiser 300 because it's basically conceding that demand has far outstripped supply or even their production capacity. So if you visit the Toyota public-facing website in Japan, the same LandCruiser site you'd go to spec a car or do a comparison or order one, there's now a public apology posted saying that we have greatly exceeded our production capacity. We're very sorry, and we're not taking any more orders for the foreseeable future.
Amazing.
Which is incredible.
No, doesn't it offer up the question that if you've got a model that's been successful for a long period of time, which LandCruiser has through successive generations, you'd have to have a handle on it to the point where we know what demand is likely to be. And if you got to this point, maybe you'd switch another factory to LandCruiser production or put in, I know it's always a big decision to flick that switch and say we're either going to build a new plant or modify our production balance so that we're building more LandCruisers, but surely that would have happened before we get to this situation.
You're right, and I think they had a bit of evidence too, mate, because if you remember, before the 300 came, people were snapping up 200 series at a rate of absolute knots too, so there's a fairly big indication there it was going to be popular. But also this story sort of began a fair while back now, before the LandCruiser 300 series even arrived in Australia. So when it first went on sale in Japan, I'd never heard of this either, speaking of unprecedented. They were asking their 300 customers to sign a contract with the company, promising that they wouldn't on-sell it within a certain amount of time after having bought it. If they failed, if they did on-sell it, they risked being banned from ever buying another Toyota product ever again. So they were taking it seriously from day dot. But still, they somehow managed to be caught unaware by just how popular.
So they knew more or less. I mean, Matt Campbell, this sounds like, Ford and its latest GT40. You can't sell it, in fact, to anybody for a certain period of years, blah, blah, blah. So they knew that it was going to be an in-demand product.
Damn straight.
But it's probably caught them off guard in terms of how in demand.
Yeah, and this is the thing, like that's the sort of thing you hear from Ferrari and Lamborghini. If you buy one of their cars and sell it for a profit, well, you're on the blacklist, you're never buying another one. So, this is unprecedented. And I mean, to think that it's all that for a 4x4 diesel 5 or 7 seat SUV that and what boggles my mind is that this is in Japan. Japan, the country where cars are smaller than anywhere else on the planet, and they're designed for tiny little roads and they're efficient and smart and clever and cool. And then there's the thing behind Chesto, and it's like,
yes,
why?
We're talking home of the K car too. It's bizarre, but mate, I think in Japan especially, in fact, just to give Australia a plug, they're actually blaming us. It says in the apology that they've been swamped not just by domestic demand, but by international demand as well, which includes the good people of Australia. So we're all part of the problem. But as of last week in Japan, the wait time on certain 300 series models was 4 years. Now, keep in mind, LandCruiser is a bit of a special beast, but most cars are facelifted within around the 4-year mark. So
correct.
Basically, you buy one now, you're not going to be getting a seat in it until 2026. That was last week. Things have gotten considerably worse over the last few days. Now you can't even order one.
Well, I suppose what's your guess, Matt Campbell, in terms of the proportion of Toyotas sold in Japan that would be a LandCruiser of any description? I suppose it's relatively modest compared to the model mix here.
It would have to be. And, it's a pretty important part of Toyota Australia's model mix across Land Cruiser 300 and the 70 series range. And, there's huge demand for both of those vehicles. And it's the same sort of thing, if we're hearing about wait lists of up to 4 years for the 300 in Japan, we're also hearing up to 4 years or longer in some instances for a 70 series.
Yeah.
I guess the other thing to consider is, though, if you're shopping for a particular Land Cruiser, you don't necessarily have to just go to one dealership. Like, if you think, well, if you've been told that, this Land Cruiser, well, this dealer's telling me it's going to be, I don't know, 18 months. Well, call the one in central West New South Wales or call the one in Queensland on the coast that you've never spoken to before, and just, make a holiday of it.
Yeah, that's right. Drive it back, run it in.
I suppose it depends on how stock is managed by Toyota Australia, whether they have a central, overall controller that is in touch with what's at this dealer and whether swaps happen easily or whether it's like pulling teeth. Whether dealer inventory is shared, it's an interesting question.
That is an interesting question, because I can tell you, to give you a bit of an Australian insight. So in terms of wait time in Australia, Toyota's keeping a bit cute on exactly how long they are, but there are reports of them being anywhere up to 2 years. For certain LC300s, my understanding the GR Sport is incredibly popular in Australia, but so you could be waiting up to 2 years here. And look, they reached out to us during the week after our story about the local market to give us a bit of an Australian update. So they say that Toyota Australia can confirm that orders for the LC300 remain open and unchanged for the Australian market. The recent pause on LC300 order taking in Japan does not affect the Australian market, but Toyota dealers are best placed to continue to provide updates to our customers on delivery timeframes for individual orders, i.e. speak to one or more dealers, they can give you an insight. But the only catch with that is it's business as usual for LC300 orders in Australia, but that business just isn't
not great. Because I think nirvana for an automotive brand or a dealer is to have one more order than the cars that you've got.
Exactly.
It's just, we just want that little bit more demand than supply. But This is skewed completely out of control. And it makes you think, okay, most car brands around the world are experiencing some kind of constraint, be it through COVID-related personnel issues, or whether it's supply of semiconductors and microchips, that kind of thing, whether it's transport. Do you have any clue, either of you guys, in terms of what's at the heart of this inability to supply enough Land Cruisers?
Mate, I do have a fair idea. It's a multi-pronged sort of attack here, or as they say, a perfect storm. So COVID crippled Land Cruiser plants in Japan. The production facilities were shut. I'm going off memory here, but I think the rolling shutdowns lasted a total of 20 days over several months. So they lost a whole heap of production. There's, of course, chip shortages and just general supply chain woes at the same time. So it's a combination of supply chain woes, plant closures, and COVID-related sort of shutdowns and slowdowns. But I think, the other element here that can't be discounted is just the unbelievable popularity of this thing. I really do think it's caught Toyota off guard. It's certainly caught me off guard, how popular the 300 would prove.
And I think it's also Tesla factor almost. Like, just if you make something that people want, then people will want it even more. Yeah. Like the Cybertruck, like people have wanted that for 4 years or whatever it is, and they still want it, but it's not here.
Oh, mate, that's vaporware. I'm calling it now. I mean, supposedly there have been new prototypes spotted with more, real world tires and doors that actually open and windows that don't break when you throw things at them. But look, it's been too long. I just don't know whether we're going to see it. But that's a whole other discussion.
Yeah, sorry.
I think it's parked behind the new Tesla Roadster. They'll both come out about the same.
And they're both ready to be transported on the electric semi.
Yeah, that's right. And maybe through one of those boring tunnels.
That's right.
But mate, the side topic to all the Land Cruiser stuff, and look, it has been chaotic. I think Toyota and Australians themselves would concede that. If you recall, they themselves kind of temporarily suspended orders and reset the order books back in the earliest days of it being released. So it has been definitely a sort of semi-chaotic rollout. But the people who are benefiting from that are brands like Nissan. The Patrol's never been so popular. And I think
Unbelievable, yeah.
part of that is certainly due to the fact that more people are hitting the open road and looking for a big, comfortable vehicle. But you can't tell me a part of it's not that people are walking into Toyota dealerships and being told 2 years,
Correct. You've got to agree with that. It was interesting. I was having a look at our very own Justin Hilliard's story from earlier in the year, where if you're absolutely desperate to have an LC300, why not turn your LC200 into one? Which right. is basically a body kit out of China. And there were prices quoted. Hold on, I think he did actually come up with some prices. So classic kind of China play. If you guarantee you're going to buy 5 kits, we'll do you a certain price. Yeah. So for between, let's call it just under 5 and just over 6K, you can have a new face, the near identical version of the 300's grille and bumper. They even tweaked the way the headlights are to mimic the LED DRLs that are on the 300.
Yeah, right.
The taillights, the whole bit. So if you're desperate just to show the neighbours in your street that you have actually got the LC300 and you can get a few buddies together, maybe you can get some of those kits.
I would also say that if you are really one of those people who is desperate to get a 300 series, go to the Lexus dealership and see about wait times for an LX, because you might find that there's a more free-flowing supply chain for the LX, despite the fact that they're mechanically pretty much identical cars.
In exciting news, you'll find that Japan's just shut down production on the LX.
Oh, is that right? Oh, dear.
They might still be stock coming, though. So
yeah, that's right. Yeah. But for as long as I've been writing about cars, you used to have to buy a car, pick the right car, hang on to it for a while, and then if you were really, really lucky, you might be able to sell it for more than you bought it for. These days, you don't even have to wait for the car to arrive. Whether it's an LC300 or a Tesla Model Y or whatever, these things seem to be increasing in value before you even get it to your driveway.
Well, I'm sure that was in Toyota's mind when they were talking about sign a contract, because they don't want people flipping their position in the queue and setting up some kind of market in LC300 futures, as to what it's going to be worth in a year's time and selling it for a price that's out of line with what it is new off the showroom.
Yeah, and by the by, I was at a Kia event a few weeks back, and part of the conversation was about price gouges. So buyers who are purposely buying cars that they know there's a lot of demand for, EV6 being the specific example noted by Kia, and flipping them for a profit. And what does that do? That just makes supply even harder to deal with, and demand even more. So it makes cars that are in demand harder to get, which isn't good for anyone, really.
Not just punters either. We've heard stories of dealers adding incredible delivery charges to vehicles that are in demand. So yeah, it's a tough one out there at the moment.
In Western commercial cultures, though, it's the way of life, isn't it? Who hasn't walked past 15 ticket scalpers trying to sell you last-minute tickets at a certain price?
Yeah, that's right.
At a sporting event. It's supply and demand, it's market economics. That's how it works.
But at what point do you think, like the supply and demand argument, I definitely get, but I think the pendulum swung too far the other way now.
Oh, yeah.
You do get to a point where you risk brand damage, I think. People just get fed up with it. Well, where's my bloody car?
100%. Yeah, I mean, you always want people wanting your product.
Yeah.
But if you get to this kind of chronic situation where you're just not able to supply it, that's a huge negative. Yeah, that's obviously a massive problem.
Yeah, it's interesting. Anyway, so there you go. That is Land Cruiser chaos, ladies and gentlemen, and it hasn't not quite as chaotic in Australia as it is in Japan, thankfully, but it's certainly not a smooth process either.
Cool. Anything more from your part, Matt?
No, I think that if you are considering buying a Toyota LandCruiser 300 series, make sure you watch all of our content on YouTube, because we've done quite a bit, including a comparison test where the 300 series wasn't as good as you might hope.
Yes.
So, be sure to have a look around, because I know that there's a lot of hype around it, and, car reviewers might not necessarily reflect exactly what you might do with your car or what you plan to do with it. And just keep an eye out, because, there's a lot of content out there about 300 series that could help you make your decision.
The one that comes to mind, is it the crafty one where he's on slippery mud and he starts to unleash his inner child and gets a fit of the giggles when he's trying to climb up a particular slope? Or was
I
he
think
in
that's
something
actually
else?
that's in one of the Nissan Patrols.
Oh, Nissan
actually.
Patrols. There you go. All right, we'll have a look at that too, because you could probably be having a look at a Nissan Patrol
And
in
just as
the near future.
a
Yeah.
final Land Cruiser thought, if you think it's bad for the 300, the 70 series is reportedly even worse. The media got hold of a dealer notice a couple of weeks ago that said wait times on the 70 series were, and I quote, 4 years or never.
Wow.
Which, if you read into that a little bit further, does
Well,
that mean that there's not more than 4 years of that car left?
So look, the clock's ticking on that car. There's absolutely no doubt. But I did speak to Toyota about it, and they said that was the view of an individual dealership,
Okay.
opposed to the view of Toyota more generally. But look, that car is up against all sorts of issues long term. So 4 years would be a pretty good stretch. In fact, it would bring its lifespan down to about 450 years if it makes another 4.
That's true. But I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think Land Rover's Defender is the template for how 70 series could, survive into a next generation. Because Land Rover everybody was having a dig at them like, you can't kill a Defender off. You can't, you need that body on frame. And they've created a magnificent vehicle, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
And Toyota could do worse than following that as a bit of a template.
Yeah,
That's right.
Anyway, all right, that's it. That's the Land Cruiser chaos. We're going to move to our garage and cars that we have indeed been able to acquire. No money changed hands, I might add, but we've been able to steer them. And Matt Campbell, can I start off with you, please? This is one that you've been driving for some time.
Yeah, it's my current long-term loan. So oftentimes we get cars for up to 3, 4, even 6 months at a time, which is just, it really helps you get to know and get to understand a car exceptionally well, because on face value, you might think, well, that was a good car, or that wasn't what I hoped it would be. When you get to spend this much time with a car, it's fantastic. So my car at the moment is a Lexus NX 350h all-wheel drive luxury. So that's the base all-wheel drive hybrid version of the Lexus NX. And it is quite nice.
Okay.
It's the same sort of powertrain that you'll find in a RAV4, speaking of huge demand cars.
Yep.
And not quite the small step up in terms of price that it used to be over the RAV4. Like, it's about $25,000 more than the most expensive RAV4 spec for specs. So
Righto.
It's not cheap. And, I sort of would struggle to personally come to be able to justifying 77,000 or whatever it might be. But it is a very nice car to drive. Couple of interesting quirks about it. It's got unconventional door handles. So both inside and outside, it's sort of, rather than having to pull a lever, it's sort of just like you press the lever on the outside of the door.
Righto.
And it unlocks like a mechanical lock. And
so it's a
you just open it.
squeeze. You're squeezing.
You sort of squeeze it, yeah. And on the inside, it's kind of hard to explain, but my 11-year-old nephew he was just like locked in. He was just, I can't get out. I don't know how to get out of this car. And
so was that a good thing or a bad thing? How do you get on with your 11-year-old nephew?
Well, thankfully, I was in the car with him, so I managed to help him get out. But there's an emergency thing, so you can lever it like a normal door handle. But there's little things that Lexus seems to always do that just make you go, "Why did you do that?"
Really?
Like
The trackpad, the mouse pad.
Exactly, the trackpad, the media
touch.
systems in the past. This one, thankfully, has a more conventional media system, although it's a square screen. Like, the infotainment screen is square.
Really?
I've had quite a few issues with CarPlay on it, like plug in, unplug, start the phone again. It's a real annoyance, but that's the biggest annoyance with the car so far. Love it. It's got a red leather interior and it looks schmick, and it fits our baby seat and most of our baby stuff in. Maybe not quite as big as I'd hoped it might be, but
okay.
All in all, I'm about 6 weeks or maybe a bit more. Maybe I'm 2.5 months into it. But
okay.
Time doesn't exist in the COVID period, right?
In the world of when you have an infant child, the clock takes on a slightly different character.
Yes.
Yeah. Talking of door handles, just quickly, the one that I really like is in the Audi A3 S3. So it's a lever like any other from the inside. But rather than you having to put your hand up and kind of lever it back this way, you just put your fingers in and flick it up. And it allows you to do that and open the door at the same time. It's such a neat design.
Right.
So whoever thought that through absolutely thought it through. It's a really good one to use. Okay. Thank you, Matt. Chesto,
Yes.
what have you been steering lately?
So something pretty exciting. I'm in the new Kia Niro EV, which launched in Australia last week. Now, you remember the Niro family launched about a year earlier, I believe. It was quite late in its global life cycle by the time we got it. It was kind of just Kia testing the waters. So they brought in a hybrid, a plug-in hybrid, and a full EV. This time they've ditched the plug-in hybrid. It's a hybrid, a conventional hybrid or EV only. I spent the bulk of my time in the EV, and spoiler alert, I really like the way it drives. It's not like a bananas EV in any sense. It just feels like a really normal car that is super silky smooth. The ride and handling balance is fabulous. The local tuning work they've done has been terrific. But, we're talking 7.8 seconds, 0 to 100. So we're not Model 3 performance ridiculousness. It's got a 64.8 kilowatt hour battery, 150 kilowatts, 255 Newton meters.
Right.
And a 460 kilometer driving range, which is
those outputs are kind of commensurate with a typical, small to medium sized SUV.
That's exactly right. And it is a compact SUV, although with a tiny bit more space than you might expect, but not heaps. So there's a lot to really like about the car, and it makes a lot of sense for a lot of people. But there's one thing that I really couldn't quite grasp, and that was the price. It ain't cheap. So it starts. The top spec model is $72,000 for the GT.
Righto.
Right now, that's a lot of cash. 72,100, in fact. The entry level S is 65,300. Now, at the time of launch, that was only $2,500 less than the flagship EV6 bespoke EV architecture, electric car. So this kind of half ICE car, half EV was $2,500 less than the flagship. It was really weird. Then, of course, 3 days later, they upped the price of the EV6 by another 4,600, I think, from memory. So the price gap makes a bit more sense. But do you remember when we were promised, and everybody promised us this, that EVs were going to get cheaper? When is that happening? Because at the moment, they are only getting more expensive, are they not?
Did somebody say Tesla?
No, that's right.
No. We were just talking about EVs in general. Yeah,
but Tesla gives you 7 days to get an order in before they jack the prices up. Like, it's crazy. At some stage, I still think, that is a car that would suit most Australian, like urbanite Australians without too big a family really, really well. But to be perfectly honest, I don't know many that are dropping 72 grand on a car or on a compact SUV. It's a lot of money.
The other mystery at this point is the elaborate nature of the car's manufacture, the materials that goes into it. No one's really, very few people are familiar enough with all of those things to be able to ascertain where's a reasonable profit margin, where's the pricing, and how much should these things cost.
But batteries are getting cheaper. We know that. That's a public number. The cost of batteries is dropping all the time, and yet the cost of EVs is only going up. I tell you what, it does leave a sizable hole in the market for incoming Chinese brands like BYD and Chery and the like, who can slot in and get some affordable EVs on the market.
All right. Well, that's very interesting. Thank you, Chesto. We'll leave it there. I've been driving the Skoda Superb. So this is the sport line liftback. It's $63,500 or thereabouts, $1,000 before you put it on the road. 2-litre turbo petrol 4. I believe it is the EA 888 engine that has been used previously in VW Golf Rs, etc. Yep. So it's that 206 kilowatts, 350 Newton meters. It's a six-speed dual clutch. It's all-wheel drive. So here you're 0 to 100 sub 6 seconds. So it's starting to get into pretty rapid car territory. And the pluses for me are many. It's comfortable, it's well equipped, it's sleek as. I really like the look of it. The one that we've had has the like a charcoal grey, and all of the what would normally be bright badges and other bits and pieces are black. It looks really schmick. And what else? Effortless cruiser. The boot is huge because it's a lift back. Good rear room, lots of thoughtful Skoda touches like the storage, the little bin, the umbrella, all of those things. Yep. And then I was thinking, what's the minus? And I was just thinking, bugger all. It's really, there's not a lot that I could pick on, really. Maybe a little firm in the suspension, but it has adaptive dampers, so you can dial that up to your own taste.
So, James, are you saying that it's superb?
Ooh.
Yes, I think I think this Skoda Superb. And in the sums, doing arithmetic, a VW Passat 206 TSI R-Line is about 4K more.
Yeah.
So it's not exactly a big price advantage if you wanted to go down the Volkswagen route. And Skoda traditionally has been that, look, all the tech and quality without having to pay the price. So there's a bit of a differential there. But I do think it really meets that kind of thinking person's European car brief.
Yeah.
I enjoyed driving it, and I was just thinking, yeah, this is a really nice car.
It's a damn sight cheaper than what you'd pay if you were shopping at Audi, Mercedes, or BMW for an equivalent sized thing.
It is.
And if you are interested more in that car, then you can stay tuned, because we have a family review coming on that exact car in a few weeks' time. So stay tuned for Emily Agar's take on it.
For what it's worth, I'm also the subscriber to the theory that says Skoda is the new Saab. It's the European brand that people who aren't so fussed about the big badge kind of statement. They want the quality, they want the safety, they want all that stuff, but it's relatively low key. And I think it fulfills that brief really well.
And just while we're plugging things, the Kia Niro review is live on the site, and I think the video is going up in about an hour, Matty, or so.
Yes. So awesome. By the time this goes on to the YouTube channel, it'll probably be up on YouTube already. So if you are interested, check it out. My video of my long-term car won't be up for a few months. Sorry.
Okay, all right.
Just keep watching the Niro back to back until that one comes live.
Yeah, very good. All right, now we will go to comment of the week. As last week, we were talking about Commodore in another universe. That is, what if rather than shutting Holden down, GM had sold it, along with Vauxhall and Opel, and it ultimately became a Stellantis brand? And where might Commodore be right now in 2022? And look, Fatman Overlanding came at us with a really interesting comment. He said, Holden, it's either bad timing or lousy marketing or both going against it. I was very surprised the Crewman, two-wheel drive and all-wheel drive, and Adventure didn't do better than they did, considering how popular two-wheel drive dual cabs are, and the Subaru Outback is doing well in its niche. Could it be that both models were released ahead of their time? Would they have done better if they were released now?
100%.
And I think 100%, and so does Steve Otley, who wrote a story, Right Car, Wrong Time, about exactly those models.
Yep.
In the early 2000s, you had the VT Commodore going gangbusters, and Holden was on a high, and they actually revived the Monaro. Really high times, good times for Holden. 2003, the VY comes along, and that Commodore is very successful. And alongside the Monaro, they launched the Adventure and the Crewman, and they were ahead of their time for sure. And if they were launched now, they probably would have done a heck of a lot better.
Yeah, and I guess petrol was probably about as expensive then as it is now. So it was a pretty tough time petrol-wise, and I think that was part of the reason that they weren't as successful as they could have been.
Yes.
The V6 engine in particular was known for being a sucker on the juice. Like it was really, really heavy on fuel.
Right.
And I think we're going to do a podcast on this another time, but I would love to have an Adventurer or a Crewman.
There it is. I was waiting for it, because you are a scraper of the classifieds. You're basically an authority on what's worth what. And you're probably annoyed that we've even mentioned the Crewman or the Adventurer, because you reckon they're kind of sleeping opportunities. Is that right?
Look, I am stopping myself from scrolling away and looking at something about how much I should pay for one right now.
That's very good. That's very good. All right. Well, look, with that, we have reached the finish line. So it's time to say thank you, Chester.
Thank you.
And thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
And thanks to all our listeners and viewers, and to our production multitasker, Mr. Brett Sullivan. Thank you, Brett. Just to keep us in our places today, he's wearing a T-shirt saying, I don't always just sit and listen to my exhaust, but when I do, so does the neighborhood. Jump into the conversation. Cars Guide's on Facebook and Instagram, or email us at comments@carsguide.com.au. Listeners, please take a moment to rate and review the show. 5 is the preferred number of stars. Thank you for that. And viewers, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to the Cars Guide channel so you can stay on top of all our latest content. Look, but before we go, when my mate sadly lost the fingers on his right hand in a freak accident. He reckons that he asked the doctor if he'd still be able to use it in his work as a mechanic. Apparently, the doc said probably, but I wouldn't count on it.
Oh man.